Today's topic is: what's the darkest secret you've discovered about someone after they passed away? At my last job, at a natural history museum, we sometimes received collections as part of a will. One time, we found valuable coins in a donated butterfly collection, so we contacted the relatives. The late donor's wife and other relatives, all over 70, sat with us as we opened the lid. Beneath the pinned butterflies were sealed envelopes. We opened them, expecting more treasure, but found love letters, to another woman. The atmosphere quickly turned awkward. Had a great aunt, my grandmother's sister. She was a pillar of her community and everyone loved her. She died peacefully at 87 and there was an upbeat celebration of life ceremony. At the end of the touching speeches, her daughter got up and announced that this woman had killed her husband/their father, who was thought to have died during a home invasion, and blackmailed the children to stay quiet. Celebration of life wrapped up pretty quick after that. I grew up in a large family. My dad and mom had 8 kids, but my dad had 3 others from a previous marriage. They were much older than the 8, so we considered them adults while growing up. I spent a good deal of time with their kids growing up as they were mostly around our ages. I always thought it weird that some of these cousins looked nothing like anyone else in our family. Turns out one of the 3 kids my dad had from a previous marriage wasn't his. His wife at the time cheated on him with her drug dealer. He opted to raise the kid as his own rather than let him be raised by 2 druggies. My grandfather was a serial arsonist and insurance fraudster who never got caught. He burned down the family home for insurance money when his kids were little. Several years later, he did it again to their new home, destroying multiple irreplaceable heirlooms and many family photos, as well as killing the family dog. When my dad was a teenager, Grandpa paid him and a couple of his friends/cousins to steal his car and total it. They smashed it up with baseball bats and set it on fire in a ditch. Shortly before Grandpa died, in his 70s, over a decade ago, his old barn accidentally caught fire and burned down too. The insurance company replaced it with a nice, shiny, new barn. I always wondered why my aunt had such a distant, strained relationship with her dad. Turns out she found out the truth about those house fires when she was a young adult and never recovered from it. She lost a lot that was important to her in those fires, including the dog. Can't say that I blame her. Back in the day when I was a teenager, my neighbor passed away. Dude was like an uncle to me and my brothers and sisters. He had a daughter that to this day is like our sister, very upstanding dude, pillar of the community, coach our baseball and basketball teams, worked 2 jobs and was always present. So he passes away and on his funeral his second family shows up out of nowhere. Like a full-blown second family, mistress, 2 really young kids that look like him. The whole thing was so bizarre to understand as a teenager myself in those days. Like how? With what time? I just found out last year that my granddad, who passed in 2012, upped and left the family when my mum was 15, moved in with a woman and had a son with her. He then moved back in with my mum, grandma and aunt and pretended the son didn't exist and everything just carried on as normal. Last year my mum and aunt got a random letter from an adoption agency on behalf of the son looking to find his family, and we all met him at Christmas. We feel bad for him as he has so many questions about my granddad that we just don't have the answers to. Not really dark but instead sad. When my ex, Phil, passed away, his wife and all the kids thought he took care of her financially and also had everything sorted out. He was always a very organized person and seemed to be smart enough to think of the future. Well, this guy had 0 savings and no life insurance or anything. So his wife is now forced to work for the first time ever and she's 65. My grandma was a teenage runaway who eloped with her boyfriend and lived with his family in a small shack. I guess my great-grandfather went to get her and they had the marriage annulled. I think only her sisters knew about it for years and one of them finally told one of her kids. On the other side, I didn't know my great-grandfather had married a set of sisters. He was married to the oldest sister first and she died when their baby was small. My great-grandmother moved in to take care of her for him and they ended up getting married and having a child together too. My grandma and great-aunt were sister cousins. Also my grandma was already a couple of months pregnant with my dad when she married my grandfather. Such scandal for a good Christian girl back in the 50s. I thought my auntie had passed away due to natural causes. When I was 8 my parents had said she died after giving birth and then 3 years ago when I was 13 I got told by my cousin that she had shot herself using her brother's gun. Not too dark. My mother had told us that she had stopped smoking and we all believed as we never saw her smoking again. When she died from cancer, her coworker came and asked if it was lung cancer given how much she smoked. When we cleared the house, there were several cigarette cartoons hidden. At my granddad's funeral, my stepmother took us aside, her 2 biological children, and me, my father's child to his first wife, to tell us that our cousin, our dad's brother, was, in fact, our dad's half-brother. Nan was pregnant before they got married, and Granddad had offered to marry her so that the child isn't a bastard. Granddad's mum never married, they did the business before he went to WW1, and he died over there. Granddad was born in 1915 and suffered appallingly from being a bastard. After my grandfather died, my mom found letters from a New York mental institution. Turns out my mother had an older brother with Down syndrome and my grandparents put him in an institution when my mom was about 3 years old. He remained there until his death at 48. Grandpa had a secret family. But we didn't find out until roughly 12 years after his death, when Nana died. His other kids in another state respectfully waited till Nana passed before making contact. To my mother, surprise, we're your half-siblings. Grandpa was an ugly abusive alcoholic. No idea how he landed 2 women, let alone 1. A distant uncle-in-law passed away a few years ago and left my mother-in-law his laptop full of pictures. I'm the designated IT person in the family, so I was tasked with going through all the pics, preserving the ones with immediate family members, and wiping everything else. This is how I discovered he had a collection of saucy pics from multiple women who vaguely resembled his wife when she died at age 70-ish. They looked like selfies shared with him over the years, and were scattered throughout every folder in the computer. So I had to sit for hours screening everything, to make sure none of his extensive stash made it to the selection of pictures of family members for my mother-in-law by accident. Not necessarily dark, but found out my grandfather was some sort of spirit healer. Mother told me their home was visited by people around the world. Not dead, but my parents finally are going through the tons of shit, or life treasures, they've managed to hoard over the years, and I found old love letters from my dad to mom. It's crazy to see that my dad was an actual person at one time, like he had emotions and stuff. I don't think I've ever heard him say, "I love you," to anyone, but in these letters he signs them off with "I love you" and other stuff like that. It's kind of sad seeing them now. He's cranky and does his own thing and she seems to just annoy him. Had a great uncle who died in World War II. His younger brother wouldn't talk about it and never provided any details. Then when he died, we were cleaning out his attic and found a footlocker filled with all his brother's stuff. In it were letters from the army and some buddies that told the story of suicide. No one knew my grandma had fake boobs till she passed. My dad and aunt argued with the DR when they saw it listed, insisting they had the wrong patient information. Nope, it was correct. She had a boob job in the 60s. It was right at the end of her life, but my mother told me the entire story about how she got pregnant with my brother was a lie. She had always told us she got pregnant the first time she had sex. She had been told it was impossible the first time. Well, that was a lie. She was sleeping with multiple people at the time, got pregnant, chose the one with the most money to take to court and essentially sign away rights that probably weren't his. He paid her like $1,400 to be rid of the responsibility, and she was fine with that. She ended up telling me the name of the man she actually thought was his dad. Said he looked just like him as he got older. Then she told me never to tell my brother. She was dead 15 minutes and I was on the phone telling him everything. 2 minutes after my grandfather's funeral, I found out that he had been in a sexual relationship with the nurse that would regularly visit Grandma since she became ill and housebound. Grandma knew. Stranger yet, she was okay with it. Dark, but sad dark. My dad's eldest cousin died very suddenly of an aneurysm when she was 40, leaving 4 children. Aunts and uncles in the family was rushing around trying to find my grandfather. My dad didn't understand why there was so much urgency compared to telling other relatives. Then the penny dropped. She was his sister. Before he was married, my grandfather had had an affair with a married woman. She had reconciled with her husband, but he didn't want another man's child. My great-aunt and her husband adopted the baby. Obviously it was right for her to be adopted within the family if my granddad didn't want to be a single father, but the kids should have been told. My dad was an only child, and for up to 31 years he could have known he had a big sister. He had her photo in a prominent position in his living room for the rest of his life. My godmother died in January 2024, and when I went to her house to get her cat, I discovered she was a hoarder with abysmal debts. I then understood why she was never home when we were passing by. Not particularly dark, but after my grand died we found my granddad's birth certificate and we were able to figure out he was adopted, and eventually found out who his real parents were and discovered we had an extended family. Also, when my dad died I found his porn folder on his desktop which I faithfully deleted. I knew someone who went to their grandfather's funeral and nobody could figure out why there was an American flag draped over the casket. There was also a group of men present nobody knew who all seemed to be together. One of them approached the widow and handed her a folded flag and thanked her for her husband's 30 years of service in the CIA. Nobody in the family knew, including her who was married to him for over 50 years. It was quite a shock for the poor woman. I mean, not that dark, but really the only secrets I've gleaned from the passing of a relative. I had no idea how cool my great-aunt truly was. Discovered she had been a model and small role actress in her youth, and she did a lot of globetrotting from which she had a very eclectic collection of antiquities. My great-uncle, who had passed away before I was born, was an architect, and their house was built with secret passages he designed into it that I had no idea were there until accidentally leaning on a wall panel and discovering a stairway direct from the upstairs bedroom to the tuck under the garage. A couple weeks before my partner's grandmother's funeral, everyone found out that one of her 3 children had a different father. A little digging and they discovered the grandparents were swingers with some of their friends. The grandmother cheated on all of them with some random and got pregnant. Upstanding member of her church and community too. Not quite on topic, but a good friend told me before he died that the son he doted on was not his, but his sister's and someone else's. They weren't capable of raising the boy, so my friend and his wife took the boy in as an infant. The parents drank themselves to death long ago. His wife died 2 years ago, so I am the only person who knows the son's parentage, and I have no intention to tell him. My dad had 2 children with his high school girlfriend that were put up for adoption. He knew about the one. but believed his girlfriend got pregnant by the neighbor that they put up for adoption again. It wasn't the neighbors. I met my half-sister this year and we are still looking for the first one. My mom's parents were die-hard Catholics. The kind that would go to church every morning at 5:30 a.m. and would get in fights with people in their community over obscure doctrine details. Well, Grandma died before I was born and my grandpa kept some of her things in a box, some letters, jewelry, pictures and stuff like that. When he died 20 years later my mom went through his stuff, including that particular box. She burnt the letters without reading them, but among the things Grandpa kept was a Silas, some sort of metallic spiked leg band. That Grandma would use high on her thigh and would stab her every time she kneeled. None of my aunts knew about this and they couldn't believe she would do that to herself, and none of them knew why Grandpa would have kept that as a memento of her. Wife's cousin's husband passed away from a dirt bike accident. She went to his workplace to clean out locker and pick up his toolbox. She finds out he's been seeing another woman their entire marriage. Like literal phone recordings and pictures of them together with dates. Fucking sad. My grandfather was not a nice person. We didn't talk to him after Grandma died. He died about 8 years later, so we go to the funeral so my mom can make sure he gets put in the ground, as she said. All these Native Americans show up and start doing ceremonies and talking about how he was a great Native and knew so much of the traditional ways and taught them so much. He was straight black Irish. Not a drop of Native blood in that man. We have no idea what was going on, but it pretended to be a Native and infiltrated them as one. We didn't say anything to them about it, we just left. It was very awkward.